central London, also confronting questions about what his Chancellor did and didn't say.
In recent weeks, the national debate around the government's plan to use former military bases as temporary accommodation for asylum seekers has escalated dramatically. What began as a logistical response to overcrowded hotel contracts has evolved into a wider controversy touching on public trust, community well-being, and the delicate balance between humanitarian responsibility and local stability. Several protest events were held across the country, some peaceful and others less so, reflecting a deep anxiety among residents who feel their concerns have not been fully acknowledged. Reports of rising unrest and strained public order have further heightened emotions, and local leaders across rural and urban regions have called for more transparent communication from central government. Although the majority of citizens have expressed their frustrations through lawful demonstration and community meetings, the perception of disorder has contributed to declining confidence in national institutions and uncertainty about how to move forward constructively. The government's announcement and public reaction. When the Prime Minister announced that several former military sites would be repurposed to house asylum seekers under new, stricter accommodation rules, the intention was to reduce hotel costs and improve oversight. However, the plan landed in a climate already strained by economic pressures, healthcare backlogs, and concerns about rural infrastructure. Many residents worried that their local services, GP surgeries, schools, and transportation networks would struggle to adapt to a sudden population increase. Migrant rights advocates criticized the use of barracks as too austere, while critics of the policy felt that decision-making lacked community input. As the public tried to make sense of the rapid changes, discussions became heated, sometimes polarizing neighbors who previously agreed on most issues. The attempt to satisfy both fiscal concerns and humanitarian commitments instead left many people feeling unheard, and the resulting confusion further complicated the national conversation. Strain on local services and infrastructure. Across several affected towns and villages, local authorities reported that existing services were approaching capacity even before the new accommodation plans were introduced. GP practices described having limited appointment availability, while community health teams noted that they lacked the personnel to support a higher population without additional funding. Rural councils expressed concern that their infrastructure, roads, emergency response units, and public transport routes had been operating at the edge of sustainability, and that abrupt increases in demand could lead to further delays and longer waiting times. Although the government provided assurances that supplementary resources would be deployed, some officials said these commitments were not formally guaranteed. This uncertainty left many communities feeling exposed, emphasizing the need for consistent, long-term planning and clearer communication. Economic anxiety in rural districts beyond public services, the potential economic impact became a central point of tension. Property owners worried that speculation and fear surrounding the redevelopment of military sites could depress local housing markets. Small business owners expressed concern that changes in public perception might reduce tourism, a key economic pillar for many rural regions. In some areas, planned investments were paused as commercial lenders waited for greater clarity on how the situation would evolve. Economic analysts emphasized that markets respond strongly to uncertainty, and that a coordinated national message focused on stability and long-term community investment would be essential to reassure residents and businesses alike. While local chambers of commerce stress the importance of facts over rumors, the absence of timely information led to an atmosphere of caution. This context underlined how economic confidence is closely tied to public trust in government planning. The role of policing and community safety police forces across the country faced an exceptionally challenging environment. As demonstrations grew, officers were tasked with managing large crowds, responding to a rise in public disturbances, and ensuring the safety of all residents, including those living in or near the temporary accommodation sites. In some regions, the need to monitor and secure newly repurposed facilities required reallocating officers from their usual patrols, unintentionally reducing response times to routine calls. police representatives stressed that their operational priorities remained the protection of the public and the prevention of harm, but acknowledged that stretched resources can complicate those objectives. Community members who felt underserved asked for more direct engagement from local policing teams, highlighting the importance of maintaining the bond between officers and long-standing neighborhoods. Law enforcement leaders reiterated that de-escalation and community dialogue were essential, calling for collaborative efforts to restore calm. A fractured national conversation. As the situation unfolded, different groups interpreted events in markedly different ways. Some felt the government's housing plan was a necessary response to difficult circumstances, while others believed that decision-makers had underestimated the emotional and logistical impact on rural communities. The rapid circulation of unverified claims on social media added another layer of complexity, often amplifying anxiety or fueling misinterpretations of government intentions. What could have remained a policy debate broadened into a national conversation about identity, fairness, and the responsibilities of state institutions. Citizens across the spectrum expressed a desire for clear, factual communication and for assurances that local voices would play a meaningful role in future planning. Many commentators emphasized that community cohesion relies on transparency rather than speculation, and that rebuilding trust requires consistent engagement and responsiveness. Impact on community life and local culture. In small towns and villages, where social ties tend to be close-knit, the rapid changes brought by the new accommodation centers created an understandable sense of disruption. Long-standing residents expressed concern that their traditions, local customs, and community rhythms might be overshadowed by the sudden arrival of a large population with different needs and backgrounds. At the same time, humanitarian organizations stressed that the individuals seeking asylum were themselves in vulnerable circumstances and often unfamiliar with the communities they were entering. For many locals, the concern was not about the presence of newcomers, but the pace and scale of the transition, which left little time for community-building initiatives. Local councils urged for structured integration programs, cultural exchange events, and opportunities for residents to meet and understand the people arriving in their area. Without these measures, the sense of cultural displacement risked deepening. Concerns about long-term planning. A recurring theme across discussions was the question of permanence. Although the government described the use of former military bases as temporary, several rural communities worried that the infrastructure being installed, security perimeters, temporary units, and service buildings, might remain long after the current pressures eased. Planning experts noted that when facilities are built quickly under emergency provisions, their future status can become ambiguous. This ambiguity fostered apprehension among homeowners, counselors, and business owners who asked for binding assurances outlining the duration of the sites and a clear exit strategy. By failing to provide detailed long-term plans early on, officials inadvertently created space for speculation and anxiety, highlighting the importance of establishing transparent timelines whenever major policy changes affect local communities. Challenges for local governance and representation. Local councillors and MPs found themselves navigating two complex responsibilities, addressing the concerns of constituents while also working with national agencies to implement policy. Many said they felt they lacked the information needed to explain the changes clearly to their communities. Some reported that planning decisions had been accelerated through emergency legal mechanisms that limited the normal channels of public consultation. This created a perception that local voices were being sidelined at precisely the moment when they sought greater involvement. Civic leaders emphasized that effective governance relies on cooperation between national and local authorities, and that strong partnership is essential for maintaining public confidence, especially when communities are undergoing rapid transitions. As public frustration grew, many representatives called for a review of consultation processes and for more regular briefings from central government. The emotional toll on residents beyond economics, infrastructure, and governance, the emotional strain on residents was profound. People reported feeling unsettled by the speed of change, by the lack of reliable information, and by the sense that decisions were happening around them rather than with them. Social forums, often the first places where residents voiced concerns, saw an increase in posts expressing anxiety, confusion, and fatigue. Mental health practitioners noted that uncertainty can heighten stress levels, particularly in communities that value stability and continuity. They encouraged local authorities to invest in outreach programs, community meetings, and support services to help manage anxiety and encourage constructive dialogue. By recognizing the emotional dimension of the crisis, officials could create an environment more conducive to calm and cooperation. Media coverage and public understanding. National media outlets faced criticism from multiple sides for either overemphasizing isolated incidents or, conversely, underreporting the concerns of affected communities. Local residents argued that news coverage did not fully reflect their lived reality, while journalists countered that verifying information during rapidly evolving events is inherently challenging. This disconnect contributed to frustration, particularly in regions where people felt the portrayal of their community as either hostile or reactionary was unfair. Media analysts highlighted the importance of context, nuance, and responsible reporting in situations with high public tension. They also encouraged viewers to approach information critically and to rely on verified sources. By improving communication between reporters and local communities, the media landscape could better support accurate understanding and reduce the spread of misinterpretations. A call for constructive dialogue and collaborative solutions. As the situation continues to evolve, many community leaders, charities, and policy analysts have called for a renewed commitment to dialogue. They emphasize that navigating complex issues such as asylum management, rural infrastructure, and community well-being requires cooperation rather than division. The path forward, they argue, lies in transparent planning, equitable resource allocation, and opportunities for residents to participate meaningfully in shaping the future of their communities. Ensuring that newcomers are integrated respectfully while preserving the identity and stability of long-standing neighborhoods will require thoughtful planning and sustained investment. Above all, rebuilding trust between citizens and government, between residents and institutions, and among neighbors themselves will be essential to creating a more stable, compassionate national climate.